Hi, I'm Tom at Just One Pack, and this is AC on the Short Alpha Clash podcast, where I talk all things Alpha Clash on my way to work. And the big news out now is the release at Gen Con of the PvE. Now, we've been talking about PvE for a while, and I think it's significant. However, I have not got my copy yet, so I can't speak to the gameplay or the effects and cards and what it feels like playing. But what it did make me think about is that this is just another format, not just it's another format. It's a new way of playing Alpha Clash, and I want to talk to you about formats. What makes good formats for card games, and what might make bad formats, and why I think maybe this is a good thing. Anyway, let's dig into it. So, to define a format is not as straightforward as I thought it would be. If you play a game and you change some rules to like house rules, you're not changing the format. Or if we were talking about in terms of regular playing cards, the difference between house rules and the real quote unquote game in playing cards is just that. It's just house rules. But if you in ordinary game playing card games would talk about a different game, that would be equivalent to another format in a TCG. That means that some rules can be the same, but some rules need to change. And there need to be something significant to change. So that's my sort of loosey-goosey definition of what a format is. Now, I know that some formats are very, very alike. I'm going to try to touch on that and why I think they might be formats. But I want to keep this in the world of Alpha Clash, and because we now have at least 3 formats, official formats, which I think is really interesting. Now, in olden days, if you look at the legacy TCGs, they would have something like standard. That is exactly that. That's the standard way of playing it. Now, old TCGs has set rotation where things rotate out, and the format is defined by both deck size and stuff like that, and all the rules for the game, but also that they are in the standard sets limited to which cards you can build from, right? And that puts up a limitation. Let me do the other way around here. So I figured there are 3, maybe 4 characteristics of a format that must be in place, right? And we can sort of talk through that. Now, one of them is a theme or an identity, something that where you could recognize the format. The one liner saying, "What is this?" Well, this is something. And for the theme of the standard formats are usually, well, some of the thing is that there's a set rotation, so the theme of them will change, but it's always the newest parts of the game, right? So there's a theme and identity to that this is the cutting edge of the gameplay. That's also encouraging to competitive play, and less maybe to strictly casual play, I would guess. That's why some TCGs fall short on that, and why I think set rotation might be going out, not really being a thing in TCGs anymore, despite the legacy past. But there is a huge amount of different reasons why they still live, and they have many formats, right? But there's an identity to that. Now, if you don't have that, you need to find some other way to do that. And if you've seen people built draft cubes or something like that, draft being a format of itself, right? There could be a theme such as dragons or something like that. It could be as simple as that, but it could also be because it revolves around a specific story or part of story, or if you're lore-driven like Alpha Clash, or a specific play style. Now, in terms of different in theme and identity, standard sets would be a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit uninteresting. But they are the standard way of playing. That they are the base on which the rules are set. So that is sort of the theme of that. In Alpha Clash and PvE mode, for instance, there is a very distinct difference. Oh, sorry, no. The theme and identity is also this. You remember the old saying that in Pokemon, you're two trainers dueling with your Pokemon, right? And in Magic, you are wizards competing, and in Flesh and Blood, you are this melee combat thing, right? And in Alpha Clash, you are two characters clashing, trying to gain the dominance, right? By removing the other player, right? So that needs to be, if you want a new format like the PvE, you need to change some of what makes it the standard or the constructed set, depending on your game, a bit different. And the PvE does this by, in my opinion, by simply removing the competitive thing or the adversary part of the interplayer communication, right? The interplayer interactions, from moving you from being against each other, now teaming up to fight something. So the cooperative part of that is a really important part of the identity of it. And that has also been stated again and again and again, right? But it's a cooperative mode. It's players versus the environment. But there's so much more to that, in my opinion, with the PvE, where you're not. So there are three parts to TCG. There's the deck building, the collection, and play, right? And at least that's how I think of it. And this difference starts all the way from deck building. So even if the restrictions on your deck building are the same for constructed play and for the PvE, the way you go about building your decks are so very different, right? Because you need to match them to this. I'm going to touch a little on that as well in balance, but there is a different approach when you're playing cooperative, balance being another part. So the theme and identity of this is from a play style, meaning you're not playing against each other, you're playing against that. That has changed. The rules to some extent have changed. That would play into other parts as well. So the identity of it has changed. And if nothing else, then this is a very particular part of the story you're playing, where you need to combat the hordes of discarded spilling out from the sewers and the subways, right? So the theme and the story and the identity of this specific format is very different than the theme and identity of other Alpha Clash formats and other formats in general, right? So there is that. That is a key part to making this another format that could be interesting. I think it will be. One other thing, I sort of touched on this, is that makes a new format is that it needs to be innovative. It needs to bring something different to the table than all the other formats. Now, if I made a format where I could use exactly the same deck with, if the meta would always be the same in one format or another because they were that alike, then there wouldn't have been anything innovative to this. There wouldn't have been any change in how I thought about this game. Not just I mentioned the example with Magic where you build a cube just with dragons, right? Now, if you have a dragon only, that is a very niche thing. Some people might not see that theme, right? So it might not be apparent that that is what sets this apart. And if this is just like any other cube, being a commander cube or a pauper cube or whatever, then I might not see the difference. There isn't anything innovative. So that's why one cube and another cube may differ in theme, but aren't different formats because there's nothing innovative in it. There's still some interesting choices. There are still some rules I need to follow because the cards are not the same. But there is nothing new. It's not bringing anything new to me, right? It's something different to me. However, if I move from Constructed in Alpha Clash to Gambit, for instance, there's a huge difference in what it brings to the table. Now, I'm not just having two more opponents. That's it is a change like in Commander, but the Commander for Magic, that is a change, but that is only part of the change. And Alpha Clash really brought something new with the portals in Gambit mode, right? Where you can open and close the effects of what you're doing and what others are doing. So you can have an interaction on a way different plan. That makes it a thing that could set it apart and therefore be a new format. For the PvE here, the obvious thing is that you are now playing against the deck. Against the game, right? So that's an obvious difference in an obvious innovation. This is so much different than what you're used to. And that will have, as I mentioned, that will have an effect on the way you are playing it, right? And the way you are building for it. Now, usually, I haven't tried Lorcana's PvE in multiplayer mode. I know it's possible, but I can see in this that you want to fill different roles at the table, right? So if sort of the same roles as you get in the board game, right? You want to have different functions to optimize your chances of winning. You need someone who can deliver protection, or someone who can clear a board or deliver whatever it might be, right? You need a bit of different mechanics to work to take advantage of the fact that you are more than one person playing, right? You need to have different play styles, different products, different all sort of things, right? So different cards, different effects, so you can optimize your chances of winning, which is the whole point, right? So instead of 1v1 where you have to take into account what the others are doing, you can now spread that out, leaving a much greater punch, which, as far as I understand, is necessary for you to win the PvE, right? So there is a very innovative part to this in all the aspects of the game. So the PvE has a new theme, new identity, and it has an innovative acceptance. This is the same for all the games, right? Also innovative is that the rules may change, right? So you could have different rules and you do, in the PvE as well as you do in Gambit. There are rules that are present in the multiplayer Gambit that is not present in the classic constructed setup, right? Because they are needed and because they are helping you to differentiate this format from another. making it innovative, making it different, and making it interesting, giving a new thing. So the last part of this is the balance part of this. So that's the third part. There needs to be a balance in a game. So there is nothing fun and interesting in a game if you have one way of winning, right? That is some of the things we are bashing our board games for, is having a single winning strategy. Now, if there are only one way to win the TCG, that is going to kill that TCG. That's why we're using a lot of focus on talking about meta, why the concepts like ban list and such is introduced, is to keep that balance. And what I mean by balance is that there are multiple ways, multiple strategies you can take to and still win the game, right? To win the game. There are not just one way. I know we say that you reduce your opponent's life total to 0. There are so many ways to do that, and I personally I'm a sucker for alternate win conditions, right? But having those opportunities are super important for a format, and it's super important for TCG, but also for a format to actually be a separate format and not just house rules, right? It also needs to have a different meta, meaning that one strategy that are super strong in one format may not be viable at all in a different format. Now, in Alpha Clash isn't that hard yet on milling strategies or diminish strategies. It would be the name in Alpha Clash. It's not a big thing yet. It's annoying, but you're not going to win by milling. It's not a viable solution. In Gambit, that is completely impossible to do, right? Just like a mill strategy in the Commander is really, really hard to pull off, like in Magic Commander, right? So, however, what could work in one format may be a difference. Now, I'm not saying you can diminish your way to a victory in Siege of the Forgotten. You probably can't, but there may be strategies that are not effective in Constructed or in Gambit that are very effective in the PvE. Not at least because you may need 2 or 3 different decks, 2 or 3 different strategy decks to actually win the game. So you may need like a healer and a tank and stuff like that. You may need different strategies, putting them together to do that. So there is a need for a difference, right, in balance, if you will. So that was the 3 main parts, and I think in all 3, not that I was doubting that the PvE would be a different format entirely, but I think having those 3 is also a great starting point for having a successful format. Right? Now, I did kind of hint that there might be a 4th, and time is running out for me. I did mention that there might be a 4th. In some discussions I've seen, is the accessibility of cards an important part. Now, the only thing in terms of accessibility I want to mention here, because I don't think that really matters for format. I know there's some formats that revolve around the fact that cards can be hard to obtain, but something like Pauper in Magic, right? Because some of the really high value gameplay wise cards are really, really bloody expensive in Magic, then people came up with the format of Pauper, where and that delivers much of the same things, but not exactly the same. But there is in terms of formats, I mean. So there is a thing about that could be a defining factor for it. For the PvE here, the accessibility of cards, until we know whether or not it's beatable or not. I haven't seen anyone beat it yet, or talk about them actually winning it. That's a whole different episode. But in terms of accessibility for the card, that must be the event deck and the minion cards for the game itself. Now, those are very, very accessible. You can just buy the box and you're ready to go, right? So that is the lowest barrier of entry possible, is to simply requiring you to buy the box to do so. That could be a price point, stuff like that, but it is accessible to everyone who who wants to play the game. Anyway, that was a lot of waffling about general TCG design. That is also a hobby of mine, and I'm really, really excited to get my hands on the PvE. So hopefully soon. Good luck at Gen Con anyway. Talk to you again soon. Bye.